So one of B&M's models is dying. That's not too unusual. I mean, people agree that the dive coaster model died only a few years back, but it did kind of revive that with the Wrath of Rekasha. But off that tangent, let's get to the real reason why you're here. Your hypercoaster's dying? Well, there's many reasons a model can die. For starters, they can be overmade, where every park that seems to be fit for this coaster already has it, and it just doesn't get made anymore. This happened with the Wild Mouse. There's also the reason that they're just too extreme where it never gets purchased. This doesn't really apply to the Hyper, but it applied to the RMC T-Rex model, an extreme single rail that just played off the positive reviews of RMC Raptor. There's the third reason where it can just be too expensive. This is why places like Six Flag parks don't get really heavily themed coasters. They just cost too much. And a little like part 2 to 3 is that parks may just not be in the budget for a big $20 million headlining attraction. Then there's the other and maybe most important reason just isn't room. This applies to larger coasters like Gigas where you need a very large space, so it causes park staff to jump through a lot more hoops to get the big headlining attraction. Or another reason is that the manufacturer just does it better than another one. So they stop selling that one style because their other company is just doing it better. This happened with Gigas. The first Giga ever made was by Intamin, but now when you think of a Giga, you just think of Leviathan or Fury 325 by B&M. So all this brings us back to how is the B&M Hyper dying? Well, two of these five reasons apply to the B&M Hyper coaster. The room is proving to be an issue. There isn't much space for these large rides, and it can also be a bit pricey at around 15 to $25 million, which for these coasters is pretty middle of the road. But let's look at some of these stats. The first one ever built was back in 1999, Apollo's Cherry to Busch Gardens Williamsburg, and there's been 10 built since then, all over the country and world, but mostly in this country. Only 4 haven't been built in the US, and the major issue here is timing, though. I mean, there hasn't been a single true B&M hypercoaster built in 5 years. Some may blame this on COVID, but there's no way that's the reason. I mean, we've seen dozens and dozens of different coasters and models built since 2020, so this can't be the reason why we're seeing a decline in hyper purchases. But when you go deeper than the coasters and years themselves, you can see that the parks have a play. There's the big coaster capital parks like Six Flags and Cedar Fair, with the only exception being BGW and SeaWorld Orlando, all bought hyper coasters. Wait 1 second. Quick flashback to about a year ago. All over the news it said Six Flags and Cedar Fair merger finalized. Both of these two major coaster parks that contain 5 out of 11 hypercoasters in the world and 4 out of 7 in the US went bankrupt and had to combine. But that doesn't make sense because there were hypers built way before that. It's only been a year since that happened. That can't be that quick of a decline in coaster purchases. But if you look when they started to go bankrupt, all the way back in 2009, and the last hypercoaster that was built by Six Flags or Cedar Fair was back in 2010. But the purchase was in early 2009 and it was constructed later that year. So these companies started to go bankrupt in 2009. The last hyper purchase by these two companies was in 2009. We saw this with other coasters too. I mean, the coaster capital of the world, Cedar Fair, starts to go bankrupt. So no wonder coaster purchasing has declined. But here's my theory. Hypercoasters are dead. This coaster model is going to pull Lazarus and just come back to life. It's going to be a time where Six Flags and Cedar Fair are just going to get more hypercoasters and crazier things like that. I mean, they're hitting all-time high revenues ever since they merged back in July of 2024. There's going to be new crazier hypercoasters that will come soon because parks always find a way to make space and build these headlining attractions. And I'll say this, if they don't, it's because coasters like Gigas, which are really just hypercoasters plus 100 feet, will get purchased more. Just like how Busch Gardens Tampa has been rumored to have one for years. But eventually we know that the parks will come back to these. They're just loved by the people so much. And happy park goers equals more time spent at the park. It means more ticket sales, more food purchases, and more parking purchases to go back and make money. That's what they always want to do. When there's new rides, parks can market all around it to attract the customers. So the question that you came here for was, well, it's yes, they're dying. B&M Hypercoaster model is dying, but not for long. They'll be back. They'll be back really soon. just like how the dive coaster did a couple years ago. So don't count hypercoasters out just yet.